really excited to have John Barrows, CEO of JB Sales. We've got a great topic, which is what's old is new again. Sales fundamentals are weak. And for those that don't know, I do a weekly post on LinkedIn on my Be Old School But, which is all real-time stuff that I see that's just, for lack of a better word, just the stupid shit that average performers would have done 20 years ago, and today it's like rare. Maybe the top performers do it. So great topic to dive into. We're sponsored by the Alexander Group, who's the go-to-market and sales comp sponsor of Sales Community. The way I describe him, if you think about kind of Bain and McKinsey being white collar, Alexander Group's the kind of blue collar. They've got amazing expertise on staff themselves. They don't outsource it. They get, for lack of better words, they get shit done fast as well. Great people that have been there a long time as well. And for those that are members of Sales Community, thanks. For those that are not, Tucker, you can put on the free link. You can go to salescommunity.com, and on the site, there's a link, winter free, so you can get a free membership. So lots of great content there for sure. So by way of introduction, John lives in the Boston area. So for those Bostonites, Woburn in particular, he's got an awesome daughter, Charlotte, and he did a book years. That's a great Patriots glass there.
Got to represent.
By the way, we are approaching March 28th.
Yep.
Right.
Interesting day for the Patriots fans.
Yeah,
we're going a million different directions here. I mean, we got to burn this thing to the ground and start from scratch, basically. But everybody gives me crap these days for the Patriots. I'm like, look, I got 20 years in my backpack of awesomeness, so you can talk as much crap as you want. We are the greatest team of all time, and you can't touch it. So,
yeah. It's a big deal. The Lions make the playoffs once, and
right.
During that same period of time. But anyway, so his Tucker, maybe you can pull the link up. But John did a great book. I want to be in sales when I grow up. And maybe just want to give a little commercial while we're talking about it.
Yeah, it was just me and my daughter. When she was young, I was traveling all over the place. And, when you tell your kid you're in, a lawyer, a doctor, and all that other stuff, they get it, right? Because they see it on TV, right? But when you tell your kid you're in sales, they kind of look at you sideways, like, what? Like, you just talk to people all day long? And so it was a really good way for me to connect with my daughter. And it was her journey on selling Girl Scout cookies and learning along the way. And so we put that together, and the goal there is to get, obviously, introduce kids to sales at an early age so they can see it as a profession they can be proud of, but also to get more women into sales. And 100% of the profits go to charity. So today, if you look on my LinkedIn post, you'll see I'm giving away free copies of the book to women who have kids and want to kind of get them to understand what they do and how they should be proud of mommy. And also girl dads like me who have little girls who might want to get them exposed a little bit to what sales is really all about and how it's not just about, screwing people out of money and, commissions and all that other stuff. So yeah, it's having fun with it.
Totally. And I always find it interesting. Obviously, people are trying to support women and DEI kind of in the workplace. But my argument is it's really you only have the kind of pile of the talented women that you have now. But kind of how do you go back? I usually say kind of to the college ranks and say, here's a great profession, but you're even bringing it back sooner to say, hey, well, this is something that's great. If you like selling the Girl Scout cookies, I mean, that's a lot of analogies to that, to selling Girl Scout cookies to the highest ticket complex tech item there is, right?
Oh, I mean, talk about door to door. If you go to I Want to Be in Sales When I Grow Up, you'll see growup.com. You'll see how we practiced, a pitch. We practiced door to door selling. We practiced objection handling, and we then went door to door selling. And you'd be amazed. In February in Boston, it's not exactly warm, and we're doing grinding out there, doing door to door, knocking on doors, and you'd be surprised. Like I thought, oh, it's a little girl selling. Who's not going to just yes, please? Oh my God,
right.
Look at you. There's still people slamming doors in our faces. And nope, all set. And I'm like, what? So, kind of gives them exposure to, that grit, if you will, about what it takes. And I think if you can make that connection for kids that it's not just about making money, right? It's about helping people out. It's about solving problems. It's about, trying to find the right audience, right? Some people aren't, you're not the best fit for everybody, right? So there's a bunch of learning lessons at the back of the book that I think are applicable to every role in sales. I don't care how experienced you are. So awesome. So Kevin O'Rourke, thanks for the
jab against the Giants. So for those that don't know, Patriots would have been, could have been, should have been undefeated.
The only fans in the entire league I can't talk shit to. So good for you. You got it. Eli Manning can kiss my ass, but you got the bragging rights over us, and you've earned it. So I won't take it away from you.
So Kevin, you may not realize the unsung hero. And I'm going to give a plug here for his book that I literally just got yesterday. But Colonel Greg Gadsden has a book, Finding Waypoints. And I had the pleasure of skiing with him in Beaver Creek 2 days ago with a kind of wounded veterans program. He lost both his legs in an IUD explosion in Iraq. And long story short, he obviously, insane everything he had to go through. He's got an amazing family, has 6 grandkids, three and under. But part of his story is somehow he bumped into Tom Coughlin that year, and they had a lousy start, 0-3, 0-4. Greg came and spoke to the team, and all of a sudden he became like the North shining star for them, was there at every game, was there kind of in the Super Bowl, and provided that extra inspiration, which, as I told him, you're the one you're the one that's responsible for the Patriots losing their undefeated season. And yes, he is a fellow West Pointer. So, and if I remember right, I don't know, somewhere in late 80s, I think is when he was there. So Kevin, great shout out for you. All right, so let's get back on track here. So we're not quite sure how we met. We think it was through MSP or something like that. But anyway, John's awesome and incredible, and kind of we really come at things really from a different world, but I think we're kind of violently aligned on most perspectives, which is great. Mm-hmm. And always been very thoughtful, very engaging. I'll say the free content and kind of what he does and how he does it is fantastic, and definitely somebody that I admire. So thanks for all that you do for the sales world.
Thank you, man.
And somebody that's cut of a similar cloth, Richard Harris. I have some nice intro comments on you from him. Richard says, John is one of the premier thought leaders and visionaries in the sales world. He constantly is looking forward to understand what is happening. And he is still old school enough to get real and make cold calls, send emails, do deep discovery, and close deals too. Beneath his East Coast and Boston rough exterior, he's genuinely kind, warm-hearted, and sincere. He's a great husband, father, and friend. Blessed to have him as a friend and mentor. So
I could say the same thing about Richard. He's a good friend of mine, and he has been for a while. So we've definitely one of those gotten, started as business colleagues and quickly turned into very good friends. So I saw him, actually, I was out in California last week, and we got dinner. So it was good to see him.
Awesome. Very cool. So I always like to ask people, so you're at University of Maryland, TERP, mm-hmm. And what was your first job out of college?
DeWalt Power Tools. So I got my degree was in marketing, and I got into the real world, and I realized I didn't, like, as I was looking for jobs in marketing, I just didn't love what I was seeing. And DeWalt, thankfully, so Black & Decker owns DeWalt, and they are right next to the University of Maryland, and so they recruit heavily out of University of Maryland. And they had this new team called the DeWalt Swarm Team. And the idea was you got a territory, and they gave you a Dodge Ram pickup truck and a bed full of tools, and your job is to drive around that territory and basically give away free tools to construction workers. So it was under sales, but it really wasn't sales. It was more like event marketing. And so I did that, did really well there for the 6 months, got promoted up to the Home Depot team. And that's where I got a little bit more sales, because it was like Home Depot obviously had to buy DeWalt, but I had to take that $10,000 order and turn it into like a $50,000 or $100,000 order. So relationships mattered. And that's where I was, like, again, old school with tools and everything else. As construction workers, I just loved working in that field myself. And then I got Xerox, and that's actually where I got my formal education in sales. So.
Yeah, great. I mean, back in the day, that was probably one of the textbook proper sales training programs. I went to EMC. It was, hey, you just get thrown in the fire, and whoever survives. But the training and process there was probably still second to none. It was. I didn't realize it at the time, but it created the strongest foundation for my sales career that I could have asked for, and I didn't even know it. It was, I mean, talk about sales, like copier sales, like, geez. And by the way, I sold copiers to the government. So it wasn't even like I could negotiate on contract. My price was my price, man.
And but they had such a great 8-week sales training program that they put you into. And a lot of people don't know this. They actually invented solution selling back in the late 70s, early 80s. Like the whole idea of asking customers questions. Holy crap. Like I know that sounds like crazy these days, right? But that was they created solution selling. And they were the champions of it. So
that's great. So then how did you get to start JB Sales?
Yeah, so Xerox, I only last about 1.5 years there. I always ask people who've been in copier sales, like, how long do you last, right? And there's a 2-year threshold on copier sales reps. You're either in and out for within 2 years, or you're in it for the rest of your life. So I got out, but then I started a company because a buddy of mine started a IT services firm here in Boston, and it was a small business. We were self-funded, and I've always said I'm not a risk taker, but I'm a calculated risk taker. So I'm not the guy who's going to sleep on mom's couch and eat ramen noodles to scrape through, but I'll be like the person once that's a little bit stable, like you bring me in and I'll light this thing on fire. But I was 24, so I had no idea what I was doing. So I took every training I could. I took Sandler, Miller, Hyman, Taz, Spin, you name it. I was taking it, and I came across this group called Basho. And Basho was the first training that I took that I liked because it was tactical. It wasn't this big theory about selling. It wasn't this huge process I had to follow. It was, here's how to send an email, send an email. Here's how to make a phone call, make a phone call. And so I used it and grew Thrive up. We ended up being the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for a few years in a row. Got us to about 85 employees and about 12 million in revenue. And then we sold to Staples. So Staples came and bought us. And I spent about 1 year going through that integration, and come to find out, apparently I'm not a corporate guy. I don't have much of a filter, and I really don't like playing politics. So after a little while, Staples offered me another position. They fired me. And I was looking for a job, and Basho came knocking and said, "John, you want to be a trainer?" I was like, absolutely not. They're like, why not? I'm like, I don't like trainers. Because up until that point in my career, the only type of sales trainers I'd ever come across were either failed sales professionals or professional presenters. And we've all been there before, where you could tell that the trainer has never actually done what they're telling you what to do. Or if they did it, it was 20, 30 years ago. So I didn't want to be that guy. I said, well, don't worry, John. You have to use these techniques to sell so you can train, so you can get paid. I'm like, all right, I like the whole practice what you preach thing, right? So I joined Basho, took on some bigger accounts, brought on some bigger ones. And then to make a very long story short, they screwed it up and I took it over. So about 15 years ago, went off on my own with JB Sales. And I've been working with some of the fastest growing companies in the world, like Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, Amazon, Google, all those fun ones. And still sell every day, my friend. Still sell every day myself. So I manage all my own territory. I do all my own prospecting. I run all my own meetings, do all my own follow-up while trying to run a business, while trying to build a brand, while trying to, not go batshit crazy out there. So, it's a grind, but it's a fun one.
So you got your own CRM you're tracking, HubSpot or otherwise?
Yeah, I use HubSpot, track every single lead. I got ClickFunnels, you name it, man. I got the whole. It's too much right now. I'm trying to coordinate it all, put it all in, to get it to work together. But it's working.
Awesome, that's great. So I have a story about getting fired, but I'll ask you first. Was there any kind of specific thing that happened as to why you got fired?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually wrote a blog post on this one called, the biggest, I think the biggest lesson I've ever learned in business. And it was about being fake. So I kind of set the stage, as Richard Harris said, like my rough exterior. Like one of the things about me is authenticity. I've leaned into authenticity. I think lying's, I don't know why people lie. Just, it's so hard to, right? I think it's so much easier.
It's a lot harder. You can't remember. Like I'm not smart enough to remember.
Me neither. So I'm not that guy. But when we were getting acquired by Staples, and this is a fun story because it actually ultimately ends with Jack Welch, which I know you know. So when we were getting acquired, we were 25, 6 years old or something like that. And none of us had any idea what was, so we brought a consultant in. We were like, hey, and he's like, all right, these are the type of questions they're going to ask you. Make sure you answer it this way so you don't screw it up, right? And some of the stuff the consultant was telling me, I just wasn't comfortable with, right? I was like, all right, but hey, I'm a minority shareholder here. Like, I'm not going to screw this up. So when the interview came, Jay Baitler, love you guys. Love you if you're still out there. He's interviewing, this guy ran a $12 billion part of Staples, right? And he's interviewing me and he's like, so what do you think of the acquisition? And, I'm like, oh, it's fantastic. Can't wait. This is going to be a great, blah, blah. And in the back of my head, I'm like, you guys are just going to eat us up and spit us out. I'm probably going to be looking for a job. You know what I mean? Like so in the back of my head, I'm thinking this is going to be fucking brutal, but he saw right through it. So afterwards he met with my CEO. My CEO was like, hey, what do you think about John? Or no, what do you think about my management team? And he's like, oh, you got a rock solid management team. He's like, there's one concern I have. And he's like, who? He's like, John. And my CEO is like, wait a minute, what? Out of anybody, I thought you weren't going to have a problem with. It was John. Like, he's the heart and soul of this company. Like, he bleeds blue, like all this other stuff. He's like, yeah, I don't think he's the guy. So anyways, fast forward, I wasn't allowed to reach out to, like, I kind of did my thing, and it was painful as hell, man. I mean, I fought it. I am not a corporate guy. I just don't fit in that culture. I mean, my whole joke with Staples is they invented red tape, right? So it didn't feel right. And so I fought it. And for 6 months, I was trying to be really optimistic. And then after 6 months, I started getting a bunch of shit, and I just went very negative. And, I, did some things I probably shouldn't have. Probably should have been fired on the spot in some cases because of some of the stuff that I did. But eventually, a year in, they fired me or offered me another position. And this was the learning lesson, which is afterwards, I was devastated because I had never been fired before in my life. So I reached out after I kind of let it settle, and I reached out to Jay. And this is a closing. Let's go old school closing techniques, right? It's called the Columbo close and shit. Talk about old school, right? Columbo, remember Columbo? Like, right? He goes in and it's always like the whole episode he'd be getting his ass kicked, but then he'd like put his hand on the doorknob right at the end and be like, hey, what's that blood doing on your shoes? And all, so it's called the doorknob or the close, where you basically, it's after you lose a deal. And you go back and you find out, hey, what's the real reason I lost? Because they're going to tell you were too expensive. They're going to give you some, very basic thing. And when you say, well, what's the real reason after you've lost? You actually get some really good intel. Now, the douchey sales approach to that is, oh, no, we do that. And you try to resell them on that. That's the douchey sales approach to it. But if you look at it from a learning standpoint, you get more value out of that. If you can get somebody to tell you why you really lost, you'll get more value out of that than you will get out of a closed deal. Yep. So I asked him, I was like, hey, would you mind if I just took an hour so I understand for my own personal and professional development what happened here? So I show up at his office. He's like, absolutely. So he's like, yes, schedule with my assistant. So I show up and he's like, John Barrows, get in here. And I'm like, oh crap, this is not good. And he's like, before we even get started here, he's like, I want to tell you something. The fact that you reached out to me to talk to me about this tells me more about you than I knew about you in the entire year you worked for me. He's like, one of my favorite things to do is mentor young leaders. And the fact that you're coming to learn about what happened to you, you have an hour of my time. I'll give you however much time you need. I said, Jay, I got 10 questions for you. I go, you can answer them as openly, as honestly as you want. And we went through, and there was a couple learning lessons through those. That was basically my MBA. I got my MBA in an hour, right? Yep. Now, fast forward, I get a chance to work for Jack Welch, like GE Jack Welch, because he had started his online MBA program, right? And they were looking for a VP of sales. So I go down and interview with Jack Welch, and that's a whole nother story. We can get into at a later date, which was pretty much the coolest thing I ever heard. Like, I'm sitting face to face with Jack fucking Welch, and he's a Boston kid, and he's dropping the F-bomb every other word in the interview. And I'm like, oh, this is fucking awesome, right? So anyways, but then when they checked references, they wanted some references. You know who I gave him as a reference? Jay Baitler, the guy who fired me. And you know what Jay Baitler said to Jack Welch when he got him on the phone? He said, Jack, if you don't hire John, you're an idiot. So I got to work for Jack Welch for 3 months and got exposed to that because I got fired from Staples, and I went back to learn why.
Well, very cool. So mine, I'll try and be quick, but I didn't get fired. I got reassigned from sales, a sales leader at EMC, then got assigned to marketing, which is interesting emotion and feelings. But basically, I hadn't been, I'll say, properly coached, but we had a lot of friends that were working for me, and it's hard to kind of coach and give feedback. And long story short, I just didn't fire fast enough. Mm-hmm. So that was the net. But because of that event, then I was like, okay, I'm never going to let this happen again. So because of that, I would always oversteer around performance management. And especially, I would always say, especially where you know somebody well, you owe it to them that much more to make sure you're giving them feedback. What can they do different or better? Because if there's a surprise that they get fired and you never had the discussion, it's not their fault. It's your fault as a manager and a leader for not doing that. And more times than not, if you do that, you can coach them up so they can get better, so they don't get fired. So that was my lesson learned. But
yeah, if you're ever in a performance review and you're surprised, then your manager's an asshole.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, we're getting the topic a little bit, but performance management these days, there's a lot of different philosophies. And back in the day, we had Tom Hannigan on, who's a president of ServiceNow, and he was, I'd say, pretty old school around, hey, we give the feedback, we want people in early, we want them learning, we want them developing, but there's so many companies these days who don't have that culture, and they're afraid, or just like people are soft. What do you think?
Ouch, man. This is one thing. This is where actually, and I'll kind of touch on a couple of components of this. This is actually where I think AI is going to come into the rescue, quite frankly. So artificial intelligence, because coaching doesn't have coaching has always been the number one thing a manager can and should do, but it's never the thing that they do because most of the times the best rep gets promoted to be the manager, which is usually the worst person to promote, because the best rep is usually the artist who just does what they do and they're really good at it. Now you're out telling them to manage everybody else. I'd actually rather have the B+ A- rep, who's more of a scientist, who has a structure and a process that they can replicate to everybody as my manager, than the top rep. I want the top rep to be the top rep. Like, go make your money, man. Like get away. Like, I don't want you to be a manager, right? So they get put in management roles. They get no training and on how to coach or how to manage, and they don't get given enough time to do the coaching. So they're deal chasers. They do what they do best. They jump into deals and they close deals. That's not management. That's not coaching, right? That was me early on in my career. Was like, basically my management style was keep up. You know what I mean? Like, that was it. Like, you'll learn a shitload if you can keep up with me. You'll learn as much as you can possibly imagine. But I'm not going to sit here and babysit you, right? And that's not good. So, but you add that to the fact that this generation, and I'm just going to be this is me, old school male, dude, talking shit here. This generation does not take feedback well. I've experienced it myself, and this isn't just a couple of 2 or 3. And I've talked to managers across the board, most of my clients, and this generation, especially this one coming in, for whatever reason, when you're giving them feedback, even if it is like constructive and real, first of all, it's subjective. 9 times out of 10, the coaching that a manager is giving is subjective. It's not based on data. It's not based on insights. It's based on what they think that rep needs, which is bad. Okay. Second of all, because these kids don't like taking feedback, they fight it. And now there's an HR component to this. I know managers who are afraid to give feedback because they don't want to be sitting with HR all day because that kid doesn't think that they like them. And so it's one of those things that is dangerous because it's not going to get any better. But AI, though, there's actually some AI coaching tools right now that I'm playing around with that are bananas, that will literally record this call, and I can put in the background how they do developing rapport. Did they uncover pain? Did they divide next steps? All that stuff. The AI listens to this call and then grades the rep on those criteria immediately and sends them an email right after the call. It says, you had a 0 out of 100 on this, a 50 out of 100 on that, whatever it is. And then on the ones that they didn't do well in, they serve up content to say, hey, you didn't do good talking next steps. Here's 2 videos that you should watch to get better at talking next steps. Now, it's first of all, the endorphin component of the immediate feedback, right? So a rep's like immediately right after the call, I'm getting and 2, it's objective. Yeah. So it's not like from my manager who doesn't like me. It's from a robot, right? So how am I going to argue with this robot? And 3, now the manager can look at it at a macro level and see what the real issues are, and now have data to go to the team, to the individual reps or the team to say, Randy, you need help with qualification. Sarah, you need help with talking next steps. But we all need help with figuring out impact. So you know what? I'm going to go invest in training to figure out impact, but I'm going to coach you on this individual thing. And like, that's where I think AI is really going to make a massive difference, because coaching right now is it's brutal.
Yeah, it's amazing. So from that, I'll say conversational intelligence coaching side, are you talking about Gong, or what are some of the tools that you like
I
in
think
that
some
space?
of those platforms are catching up, but there's one that I use. It's called Wonderway. It's wonderway.ai. It's a great tool. I use that actually to coach myself. There's one, I think another one called oneshot.ai. That's another one. There's a bunch of them out there right now, but they're, the Zooms and the Gongs are eventually going to have like that just embedded into their systems. I don't know where. I haven't revisited Gong here in the past probably 6 months, so I don't know what they've done to their platform recently, but I think they're getting close. Because the challenge with a Gong is, it's great to record the call and be able to do those things, but I still have to listen to the whole call. So let's go old school again, right? the idea of me, the idea, oh, well, you could just type in the word pricing and it jumps to the word pricing and then you could coach on that. Well, not really, because maybe you said something at minute 5 that drove that conversation at minute 25. So I don't have context for that to really coach the right way. Or, hey, you can listen to it 2x, right? No, because if I really old school want to coach the right way, tone, inflection, pauses, all that stuff matters. So if I listen to it on 2x, I lose all of that. And so for a 30-minute call for every rep, it's about 45 minutes for me to actually do real coaching that matters. And as a manager, I don't have that time. So I think if you want to hire a full-time coach that is responsible, like let the manager, I've given up on managers coaching, quite frankly. I'm just like, let them be deal chasers, please. Like, let's stop this. I've been in sales for 28 fucking years, and I haven't seen anybody really do coaching at that well at a systematic level. So let them be the managers. Let them chase deals. Let them do that. Hire a full-time coach that is core responsibility is coaching each rep on that team. And I know that's an expense, but I promise you that expense will pay its way 1,000 times over if you find the right person to do it, have the tools to be able to get the insights for it.
And do you find that companies pay that, or like what percent of the time do companies pay for that coaching versus individuals pay?
Very rare. Individuals are always looking for that. Hey, how do I get, my own, I'll take that back. A players will always look for individual coaching of how I can get better. Like Tom Brady, let's go back to, I don't care what you say about Giants. Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time. There's not even a debate. Patrick Holmes is actually getting close, though. I'm a little nervous about that one. But even Tom Brady begged to be coached. You know what I mean? I think the hardest job of the NFL for years was Josh McDaniels. Because if Josh McDaniels wasn't bringing value to Brady, Brady would have sliced his throat and found somebody else in a heartbeat. So as bad as Josh McDaniels is as a head coach, one of the best. I think he's one of the best offensive coordinators, just based on the fact that Brady let him stay there for 12 years or 15 years. And if you have the greatest quarterback of all time staying with an offensive coordinator who is effectively his coach, there's got to be something there for that coach. So, yeah.
Amazing. And I should have said earlier, so for people that are watching or listening along, feel free to chime in with any questions or comments. So maybe we'll kind of get to maybe a lightning round here where we can kind of buzz through a whole bunch of things. So you had mentioned, when you're growing up in sales, I was the same way. You're basically a sponge to learn and to get feedback. So that's something we've kind of touched on, but not directly said. Generally speaking, that's a lost art, right?
I think, it's weird right now because there's so much education out there right now for free that it still, I don't know if this has changed, but again, I go back to average versus above average, right? I think above average reps historically and currently are the ones who seek knowledge, who are always trying to get better. I do believe the pool of average has gotten a lot bigger though, quite frankly. And I think average reps just show up and they expect their company to invest in training for them. I actually went on this rant the other day when I was doing some stuff because there's like ChatGPT, right? So I have play around with a lot of tools with ChatGPT, but you need the $20 version of Chat, like $20 a month, right? To really get the big functionality out of ChatGPT. And so one of the reps raised their hand and said, well, our company doesn't pay for that. And I was like, it's $20 a fucking month. I'm like, are you kidding me? Right now? I'm like, seriously, dude. I'm like, for me, I don't give it's the same thing with training. You can get a Harvard education for free if you want to. You don't get the certificate or anything like that, but you can literally take a Harvard education and get it for free if you actually wanted to. You could take my training for free if you spent the time looking through my YouTube channel, reading my blog posts, right? Now, people pay for it in my membership because I put it in a nice, pretty package for them and all that other stuff. But you can get it out there. So for the excuse of, well, my company doesn't invest in training for us, or they don't invest in the tools, I just don't understand that mentality. Because for $100 a month, your tech stack could be off the charts. And if you're telling me that for $1,200 a year to make yourself massively more efficient and get more, one deal close, I don't know what your, unless your ACV is $3, which you shouldn't be in that company anyways. But I just like that part. It just is always foreign to me. So there's such a plethora. Now, the other challenge, though, I will say is it's tough to know who to get that content from right now, because there's a lot of charlatans out there. There's more charlatans out there on social seeing how awesome. Hey, check this out. Look at this click funnel. I've sold, I drove somebody $50,000 a month through this email thing that I do. And it's like, dude, there's no shortcuts here. Like, maybe take a tip here or there, but be very careful about who you dive into fully and believe. Hopefully they align with your values first. And then that's what I would suggest people do, is go to the core value exercise internally and then go find companies and people that fit those core values. Because there's a lot of charlatans out there that I don't care how good their content is, I won't listen to a goddamn word they say.
Absolutely. We got a great question from Mark. So again, others that are watching or listening along, feel free to chime in. You mentioned AI coaching. What's your recommendation for today's minimum tech stack?
Well, I think at a bare minimum, I think obviously you got to have some type of CRM that's going to track your activities in some way, shape, or form, right? And I don't care which one that is, pick your poison. There's a lot of cool ones out there that are actually AI oriented that you might want to look at instead of the kind of the big boys and the well-known ones. But you want a platform, right? Because you don't want too many point solutions here. But I think for me, it would be, if I just had the basics, it would be CRM, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and quite frankly, that's it. If I could talk to you about a million tools that I love. I mean, there's a tool called Owler, Owler. Love that tool. It's like Google Alerts on steroids, right? So you can track all your top tier accounts and you get alerts on very specific triggers, like opening up a new office, launching a new product, merger. Like, you can get alerted on that stuff. But you can do the same thing with Google Alerts, right? So you'd set up Google Alerts for that. I think LinkedIn is probably obviously the one that I would lean in the most, right? Because there's so much insights there. Then you got to figure out where you get your data from. So, a Zoom Info, Elite IQ, something like that. And then, if you wanted to, a lot of these cadence tools are out there, like the Apollos of the world, Sales Lofts of the world, those type of things. It's interesting because they are platforms, but they're trying to reverse engineer and bring AI into these platforms, where a lot of these other ones are actually AI native platforms. My gut says if I'm starting from scratch and I'm going towards more the AI native tools, because like a Reggie.ai or something like that, those tools, because they'll actually help identify your ideal customer profile, create tailored messaging to, and help you streamline your communications. But you want a platform that goes throughout the entire sales process. That's why you see a lot of these cadence tools that started with, Sales Loft and Outreach. They started with a cadence, just purely email and outbound stuff. And now they're moving to full cycle sales, where it's call intelligence and all that stuff on the platform. Right. So Gong's moving in that direction. Sales Loft is moving in that direction. All Outreach is moving in that direction. So I think that layer, CRM is actually becoming more of just a record of, info. It's not really functional. So when these tools go on top of those, now all of a sudden you're actually in that tool, and that's where you spend your life. And then it just kind of records it there so you can run some reports off of it. So I would look at kind of probably the tools like, Apollo and those type of things, or Reggie and something like that, if you're looking for a holistic end-to-end solution.
There you go. Great. Awesome. And you've already touched on AI and ChatGPT. Anything else that you would add on?
So those are the ones. So Perplexity. So one of my favorite tools, and this is what I'm telling everybody here. Look, a lot of people I work with right now are like, man, I don't get this AI stuff. Like, here's my tip for you. Perplexity. It's free. Change your habit. And this is the easiest way to get involved. Instead of Googling something, go into Perplexity and just do the same exact thing. Just change your mindset from Google to Perplexity and ask Perplexity hey, what are the top restaurants in my area? But then just start asking it questions, right? Because it's the best co-pilot you'll ever. It's the smartest assistant you'll ever have in your entire life. Like I'm doing a presentation this afternoon to a group that is so far outside my ICP. When I say so far, they do wallpaper. Okay. Like they sell wallpaper, like super high-end wallpaper to interior designers. 99% of my clients are in SaaS. Okay. So I know nothing about that industry, I spent 2 hours last night hanging out with Perplexity and asking it questions about the industry. And I put together a presentation that's going to blow their socks off. I promise you. So I think if you look at it as your co-pilot, as you look at it as like, let me ask some questions, like any question you could think of that I would call, hey, Randy, what are your thoughts on this? Ask ChatGPT, ask Perplexity that question and see what happens. You got to learn how to ask it the right questions, but it'll even tell you. You'll say, hey, I'm a CEO of sales training organization. How do I get the most out of this tool? It will tell you. And then just say, well, what else can I learn from this? How else could I use this? And it'll guide you through the process. But you want to look at it to augment, not automate. Too many people are looking at AI right now to automate certain parts of the sales process. I think that's a fool's errand. But if you look at it augment, like me, my business acumen has gone through the roof. Like I'll give you one. There's a 10K analyzer that I came across the other day, right? I used to avoid 10Ks like the plague because they're like boring as shit. Like I went to a state school. I drank my way through college. I don't like reading. So like a 10K, I'm like, my head hurts. It's like I might read the first paragraph from the CEO saying something's cool, but then the rest of it, EBITDA and that's boring. This 10K analyzer that's part of ChatGPT, you got, again, the $20 version. You can tell it what you do. So it says, hey, who are you? I'm like, I'm John Barrows. I do sales training, whatever. Upload a few PDFs, value propositions, go. Then it says, okay, who do you want me to analyze? Oh, okay, I want to analyze Walmart. All right, go grab Walmart's 10K. PDF it, put it into this thing. It then within seconds summarizes the entire 10K, pulls out the key metrics and pain points. Not only that, then aligns your solution with that 10K and some of those pain points and gives you messaging you can use to reach out to the client that is spot on about some of their key initiatives and how you can help them. It's like cheating. It's literally like cheating. Prep for meetings. Instead of me going on somebody's website and looking them up and all that other stuff, I go into Perplexity and I say, hey, I'm preparing for a meeting with Randy. Tell me what I need to know about the sales community. Tell me what I need to know about his background. Here's his LinkedIn profile. What do I need to know about him as a person? And it'll help you prepare. What questions should I ask Randy to uncover urgency here? And what are some of the main things that we could talk about? How should I frame the conversation? What's an agenda should be for this call? Like, it is ridiculous right now if you just put a little bit of effort into it.
And besides the Perplexity tool, that's separate from the ChatGPT, correct?
It's the same thing, basically. The Perplexity, so ChatGPT 3.5 is the free version. And that's cool, but the problem with that is it's everything up to 2021. So there's no current information in ChatGPT 3.5. You get to 4, which is where you pay the $20 a month. Good. That's where you get access to the internet. And you can start to really cool plugins with other GPTs and those type of things. So Perplexity is basically the version of ChatGPT 4 that you don't have to pay for. So tomato. But if you're a starter, I would go to Perplexity first.
Awesome. Good. So I'm going to bring up some old school topics. You just brought up meeting agendas. Mm-hmm. It used to be something people would always have. Another thing, it's kind of rarely, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. I don't understand. Like people say, because and everybody just knows this. Think about the last time you went to a meeting with a mental agenda, right? Like, because we all kind of have a mental agenda of how we want this thing to flow. How often within 5 minutes of that conversation, the executive or whoever asks you that random ass question, it takes you down a rabbit hole for the next 45 minutes, right? And then you got to struggle to bring it back to what you actually wanted to talk about. Without an agenda, they're in control. You're not. Right? With an agenda, you at least have some guidelines here. And by the way, an agenda not only helps you guide the conversation, it also sets expectations and it helps you confirm the meeting. So because I'm going to put myself in the buyer position now. If I get called all the time, right? And every once in a while, somebody will catch me and I'll be like, yeah, that sounds interesting. Why don't we book a meeting a couple of weeks out, right? By the time that meeting hits, the likelihood of me remembering what this is about is pretty much zero. I got 75 other meetings that day, whatever it is. And because most sales calls are total bullshit, they drone through PowerPoint presentations, they barely engage, and reps barely come prepared. The first meeting I'm going to cancel if I need some time on my calendar is a vendor meeting, period. But if I get a meeting, like an email the day before, hey, John, looking forward to our call tomorrow. Put together a brief agenda here that I want to make sure that we go over. Anything else you'd like to add? And usually what I call a shared agenda. So I'll put 3 bullet points in there of what I want to talk about, and then I'll leave 3 bullet points blank, right? And I'll say, anything you'd like to add. Now, I only get about a 20, 25% response on that. But when I get that email back with those, like, oh my God, those meetings are fantastic. But even if I don't, the morning of, I update the meeting invitation with the agenda in there. I actually don't put the agenda in the original meeting invite because nobody looks at that. They just hit accept. But when I update it that morning with the agenda in there, it's almost like a forcing function for the person to go see what changed, especially if the time doesn't change, right? It's like, wait a minute, what's updated? So they'll open it. Oh, that's what the meeting's about. Oh, okay. And now I remember. So now I see the rep is actually prepared for the meeting. I now remember what this meeting is about. My likelihood of even showing up to that is exponentially higher if I have that prep, right? And then middle way through that conversation, especially if you have 4, 5, 6 people, you always get that person who's a little quiet, like trying, and they'll throw the zinger halfway through. Oh yeah, well, does it do this? And you're like, oh fuck, right? And now you got to go down this rabbit hole. It's like, if you don't have an agenda, good luck dealing with that without trying to be like, yeah, that's a stupid question. Let's stay focused. With an agenda, you could be like, hey, Randy, that's a great question. Is that more important than the original agenda we were here to talk about that we all agreed on at the beginning of this conversation? Because if it is, I'm happy to dive into that. I just want to make sure it's on. And usually, you know what? No, you're right. Let's stay on track here. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right.
Yeah. And then what about adding as the last item on the agenda, kind of next steps, right? Too many times people hang up. Okay, I'm going to follow up. If you follow up afterwards, if you don't nail the follow-up meeting, then
you're screwed.
This still delays the sales cycle.
The most important part of any engagement with a client throughout, it's the number one thing that tells you that you're moving through the sales process is getting a defined next step, period. Whether it's on a cold call, a meeting, a next step, whatever it is, it's getting that defined next step. And there's actually, this is where Gong data is off the charts. The Gong data talks about the average, what the best reps do versus what average reps do. And they found that the best reps spend 5 times longer talking about next steps than average reps do. What average reps will do is they'll say a meeting's 50 or 60 minutes, right? They'll wait to minute 59 and they'll be like, okay, so I'm sorry, I know we're running up on time here. What are the next steps? And by then you've already lost the person because they're checked out. They're already thinking about their next meeting. And that's where it's usually, you know what, why don't you send us the information and we'll get back, and follow up in a couple of weeks. And you've just lost all control of that sales process. Now you're in the touching base and checking in world. The best reps bake time into that to talk about next steps. And they actually, let's go old school again, use the Sandler upfront contract to set the stage for that close, right? So the Sandler upfront contract, for the people that don't know, is basically an if-then statement. It's a trial close. So you start the conversation. Let's use the shared agenda that I talk about. Randy, thank you so much. And you don't want to say, is this still a good time? That's a dumbass question to ask people. You say, hey, Randy, do we still got an hour here? Do you have a hard stop at 3:00? Okay, cool. Well, look, I'm sure you probably didn't see the agenda. Here's a few things I want to make sure that we cover. What else do you want to make sure we add? Great. Now here's the upfront contract. Awesome, Randy. Well, and this word typically is an important one. Hey, Randy, typically, say we get through all this stuff and we address those things, those priorities that you just talked about. Typically, the next step is we bring in your executive team, we bring in your tech team, we bring in your whatever. So if we get through all this, would you feel comfortable taking that next step with us? Because now you get a yes or a no right then. And if you get well, no, you know what? This is just an evaluation. We're just discovering. Okay, cool. Well, now you at least know what the meeting is. But if you get yeah, that makes sense. Well, then at the end, now it's a very assumptive close. Okay, Randy, did we hit all this stuff? Okay, cool. So now when do you want to schedule that call with your executive team? And it makes it so much easier.
Totally. And then obviously as a next step is follow-up recap notes, which for whatever reason, I think people suck at. It's totally lost art. So you'd mentioned Gong. So, Gong can actually automate that and comes up with the draft that probably puts the ball in field goal range, right? You still got to tweak it. But, how often does that not happen either?
It never happens. You can actually Google this one, Jay Barrows' favorite nugget, and you'll come up with it. It's my favorite nugget, which is the summary email, right? So you and I have this conversation, and it's not that I'm lying to you, but it's just that as soon as we get off this phone, my boss comes in and changes my priorities. Your competition comes in and talks to me about something totally different. So now 2 or 3 weeks later, it's like this conversation never happened. But and for you to try to remind me what happened 2 or 3, like shit, man, I barely remember what I said 3 or 4 minutes ago. Forget about 3 or 4 weeks from now. And so, but if you have it written down and confirmed. So there's a double take here. You not only have to summarize the conversation, you have to get them to respond to say, yes, John, that's accurate.
Right.
What you do is you say, hey, Randy, the next steps and action items here. Before we go ahead and do that, I'm going to briefly summarize what I was able to again from our conversation today. I'm going to send it over to your quick email. Could you do me a favor and email me back to let me know if it's all accurate and if I missed anything?
Right.
That simple process right there. And here's some data for you. When I get that response back, and I only get about a 35% response rate on that, even when I tell them it's happening, I have an 80% close ratio. When I don't get a response back from that email, I have a 28% close ratio. Yeah. Right now, go back to Gong. Yes. So here's actually my old school tried new school, but I'm going back to old school because I used some of these tools to summarize it and put it into the format. And I was like, oh, this is brilliant. I don't have to do that anymore. But for me personally, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but for me personally, there's a lot of benefit because I take notes when I'm like, I either chicken scratch like this or take notes. And sometimes I miss things, you know what I mean? Because I'll be vibing in the conversation, whatever, but I'll jot something down or whatever. After I get off that call, and I reflect on my notes, not the summary that was recorded, but my actual notes, and I put them into my format of my summary email, it actually helps me reflect on the meeting and also be like, ooh, crap. Like I missed this. Like that's a red flag right there. And I didn't think of that. Or God, I completely forgot to ask about this thing. And so I went from like all in on the summary, like email stuff for AI. And I've stopped that now because I personally like, now it takes me time, whatever, but this is very old school for me. I just like taking my notes, cleaning them up, putting them into that format and sending it over. And also keeping it a lot tighter than some of these other tools do. A lot of these tools will send like a 3-page summary of it, even if it's broken out, and nobody's going to look at that. Nobody's that's more for you than it is the client. What I'm summarizing is actually for the client. Like, this is what we talked about. I want to make sure we are crystal clear. This is your timeline. This is your priorities. This is the impact of the problem. You know, these are the next steps, that type of stuff. And I need to confirm that so I can then hold you accountable when you flake on me later.
Yep, absolutely. But I'd say, you and I can do that because we grew up doing it, but most sellers today don't. So they need to leverage those tools.
Yeah. David, also how you learn, by the way. Different people learn different ways. Absolutely. You know what I mean? So if you learn by having the record for you, summarize it, and then you reading that recording before you just hit send, then that's that's great. That's great for you. I just don't learn that way.
Absolutely. And David says, John Barrows, I think it's either a poodle or a goat. I'm going to give you the credit and say I think it's a goat. So great leader at Rapid 7, I believe, Wellesley guy. And Ted Grossman had asked, do you ever use Zoom transcription tools to take notes? And I think you answered that right as he was going through it. So here's one, handwritten thank you notes. That never happens.
No, I don't even do those, Randy. And I wish I did. Because don't talk about standing out, like, holy smokes. Like if I get a thoughtful letter, like just nice little, hey, John, it was great meeting you, whatever it is, like those ones absolutely stand out for me. Actually, I keep them. Like there's a list of them here. I got a whole stack of thank you cards that people have sent me, and they stand out. They absolutely stand out. You know what's even better is actually thank you, like genuine thank you cards. Like if somebody did something for you, or even if you posted something, whatever it is, just like showing like, no, hey, I'm not trying to sell you anything here, man. I just really genuinely appreciate this. Like that stuff stands out, like you read about.
Yep, absolutely. I got one month ago, Matt Hart. I had met with, awesome. But even so, forget about the customer situation in an interview situation. I mean, talk about a way to stand out. It's amazing.
Yeah.
William Adams.
Real quick on that one though. Here's again the automation versus non. There's all these tools out there that can hand write a thank you card for you, but it's obvious it's not.
Yeah, you can tell. I've tried those. Yeah, totally agree.
And when you fake the personalization, you lose credibility.
Totally.
Like you think you're getting credit because look at me and I sent a thank you card and it was personalized. No, if you sent a thank you card that's quote unquote personalized, written by an AI bot, that actually, I discredit you more than I give you credit for.
Yeah. Plus, I'm sure you're like me, right? It's it's all chicken scratch. Nothing's really legible. So William Adams says, I've known John a long time. He is top shelf. Totally agree.
Thanks, William.
So maybe wrapping up here, what about work ethic these days? I mean, we both grew up just kind of grinding away, 7x24. I can't tell you how many times I'll send. It's interesting. CEOs of companies I work for, I can send a note on, a weekend. I get a response right away. A rep, it's like, Monday, if I'm lucky, like, oh yeah, well, that was the weekend. I'm like, well, no shit. You're you got to be on 7x24.
Yeah. That's my biggest concern. I will tell you right now, it is every year I get older, I sound more and more like my dad, but the work ethic one is the one that I genuinely see. Now I'm going to give both sides of this equation though. Okay. It's kind of like the trophy generation, right? Everybody bitches and moans about the trophy generation. Well, okay. But who gave them the trophies? We did.
Right.
So it's not their fault that they're like this. It's our fault that they're like this. The work ethic, though, I fundamentally I don't know, and you can back me up on this. I don't know a single successful, like genuinely successful person out there that hasn't worked their ass off to get to where they are. Like I have 12 personal guidelines to success, and my first one is work hard or work smart and hard. Everybody's trying to work smart these days. Everybody's trying to hack the system and whatever it is, and they're trying to get away from doing the actual work that it takes to do it. No, you have to work smart and hard. You got to work your ass off right now to be successful. I'm sorry. There's no shortcuts to that. Yeah. And what kills me is even before COVID hit, I'd go to training. I would train, and it was a full day training. It was like 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, right? And usually from 4:30 to 5 when I wrap up, kids are coming up, asking me questions, whatever. And then 5, I'd open up my laptop to, fire off a few emails before I went to the airport. And 5:30, I'd usually leave the office. And when I tell you, ghost town, every office that I went, 5 o'clock, straight up ghost town. Yep. And I'm just like, are you all killing it right now? Like, are you guys all like above quota? Because if you are, then yeah, go home at 2 o'clock. I don't give a shit. If you're above quota, go home at 2 o'clock. I don't care. I'd still rather you work a little bit later, but how could you be successful thinking in the 9 to 5 mentality of this? I just don't get it. Now, the other part of this that we have to realize is, yes, we grew up and y'all old school and it's better. It wasn't fun, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know about you, Ray. I got my ass handed to me, and I did not like being in the corporate structure and being told what to do and all that other stuff. But it was it was a learning experience for me. Now, these kids have so many other options on how to make money. I actually don't blame them to a certain degree. Because if you could tell me like, okay, John, you got to make, 80 grand a year and you're going to sit in a cubicle and I'm going to force you to be in here from 8:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon, 5:30 at night. And, I'm going to beat the shit out of you and I'm going to put you on a pip and I'm going to yell at you every single week. Or I could go home and go to Alibaba, buy a bunch of material, drop ship it to Amazon and create an Amazon store and make 20 grand a month and fly around the world. Which one? Richard Harris, let's bring this all the way back around. He actually said something that was really insightful.
Richard's great book.
His book is awesome. Pick it up. What he said was, we all shit on this younger generation, but a lot of it has to do with jealousy because we didn't have those type of opportunities. We didn't have those tools. We didn't have that ability. I'll tell you right now, I'll be shocked if my daughter goes to college. You don't need a 4-year degree right now. Yeah. Like going to a 4-year college to go $300,000 into debt to get a $50,000 a year job. Are you out of your fucking mind? Like that is a fool's errand. Now you and we needed that college degree to even get a seat at the table to have an interview because there wasn't the internet. There wasn't these side hustle things that could make you 10, 20 grand a month on, just by, doing some TikTok shit. Now there's so many options. The problem is they don't have the foundation that allows them to understand the long game here, right? Because they're all looking for the short game here. And it's cool. You can make a bunch of money in your 20s, but if you don't have the right pieces in place, that's probably going to be fleeting. And what's going to happen is we'll be in a boom economy for the past 10 years and everybody's going to get these inflated egos about how good they are. And then the shit hits the fan like it did in early 2023. And now they're like, wait a minute, what, like, you don't want my stuff? Like, I'm not like, what happens? And now they're living back in mom's basement because they have no skills to fall back on. I was able to fall back on skills, and I'll finish with this. I know we're coming up on time, but I built this business. I hit the ultimate place of I think entrepreneurship in the sense that I got to 6 million in revenue. I got to 20 employees, and I didn't have to be the guy anymore. I was kind of walking. I was like, for a year, it was the best year I've ever spent in business. Then 2023 hit, and everything fell apart for me. Like literally fell apart because 95% of my clients are in the SaaS industry, and I went from 6 million to zero, like zero. And so I had to restructure everything. And I'll tell you right now, I sell all day, every day, but I haven't like hardcore sold in a long time, right? Like hardcore selling, right? Yeah. When early 2023 hit, I was like, uh-oh, I took my CEO hat, threw it off, and I put my sales hat on, and I went to work. And I ended up getting like 40. And you can look at there's a blog post I did back in early 2023 that shows this. It showed my calendar. And I got 49 meetings in February, and I got 70 meetings in Q1. And it was just, and if I didn't have that ability to go to work like that, I wouldn't be here right now, quite frankly. And so like the work ethic and my ability to prospect, that's why I cringe when SDRs try to skip over prospecting and so I can become an AE, a real sales rep. I'll tell you right now, you learn how to prospect, you'll never go hungry. And AEs, those ones are like, that's not for me. Like, you know, that if an AE ever sat in front of me these days and said that the reason that they missed their quota was because their SDR didn't give them enough leads, before that sentence got out of their fucking mouth, I would fire them. I would literally fire them. I was like, because why in the world would you want somebody else to rely on somebody else for your success? I don't understand that mentality. Yeah. So I'm out there grinding just like everybody else. And I promise you, I'll beat you. Let's go back to work ethic. I'm not the smartest kid out there, man. Like I told you, I drank my way through. I'm not dumb, but but I will outwork you. I promise you that. And I've been here for the past 15 years. And there's been a lot of people that's coming in and out of this space and aren't here anymore because they don't have the ethic, the work ethic. They don't have the consistency. They don't have the brand, and they don't know how to prospect.
Yeah, or they blame marketing. You know, they're not giving me enough leads, or not getting the right people to events. So, all right. So, kind of wrap it up here. Amazing, tons more we could talk about. It's been fantastic. Any PG Randy stories to tell?
Just, man, I think you're one of those ones that got me like to reconnect on the old school, right? Because when we met, and I think it was up in where was it? It was up in Burlington and you kind of brought your notebook, all your chicken scratch notes and shit like that. But then I saw your database of 400 CROs that you could literally call on their cell phone of these billion-dollar organizations, and they'll pick it up and be like, "Hey, Randy, what's up? What can I help you with?" That type of thing. Like that was a refreshing, like, all right, somebody who's built a career off of relationships and obviously knows how to leverage them, but not how to abuse them. So that was, to me, I was like, okay, like this isn't just an old school guy who's doing it just because. Like this is somebody who's built their brand and built their relationships the right way. And I just genuinely appreciated that the first time we actually sat down and really talked.
Thanks. And for those, watching younger in career, it's not, you don't do it, back when, same thing with you when you're in your 20s or 30s, you're not doing it because you say, here's what's going to happen in the back end of your life. You have to be sincere, genuine, authentic. Yep. You got to be in the trenches. You got to help. If the shit's hitting the fan at a customer, who are they going to call? Because they're hopefully going to call you. If it's midnight, hey, you got to help me do this or do that. People need coaching. People need help. And, if they know you, like you, trust you, they're going to be there for you, and it's a two-way street for sure.
There was early in my career, there was a group called Business Networking International, and their whole mentality was givers gain, and the whole idea was give and don't expect much in return. That mentality that I did so early on for so many people has saved my ass later on in my careers. Because those 49 meetings, a lot of them were from people who I was able to tap back into, be like, Randy, I'm in a fucking bind right now, man. Do you know anybody I should be talking to about this? And I never ask for favors, but when I need them, I got a whole network that'll, yes, John, what can I help you with, man? Because I bent over backwards to help them early in my careers.
Totally. All right. And then Tucker, I forgot to put up the plug for my book. You want to put it there. A lot of those leaders that you mentioned have some great nuggets in there for sure. And next week, we have Peter Bell, who's a longtime tech exec, general partner at awesome venture capital firm Amity Ventures. Our title topic is Best Practices for Sales and Startups. I know that will be great. And John, you exceeded my high expectation. Just so many amazing nuggets here. Thanks for all that you do in the sales world. And Tucker, thanks for your help behind the scenes as always. Everybody have a great day, great week. And John, if you can stay on, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everybody.